It's a feeling many of us know all too well, the quiet, persistent doubt that whispers, "You don't belong here." Whether it creeps in during a big meeting, a creative project, or even a casual conversation, imposter syndrome can feel like a constant shadow, undermining your confidence and stealing your peace of mind. But what if the key to silencing that inner critic had been within your reach all along, waiting in the timeless wisdom of the Stoics? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This simple yet profound idea reminds us that our worth isn't dictated by external validation, but by the way we choose to see ourselves. Today, we're diving into 10 Stoic insights that will not only help you confront feelings of inadequacy, but also guide you toward a more grounded, confident, and resilient version of yourself. Let's begin this empowering journey together. What if you could let go of worrying about things you can't control? Imagine the freedom that comes with releasing the endless tug of war between your efforts and the opinions of others. This is where the Stoic concept of the dichotomy of control becomes your greatest ally. Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, teaches us that there are two categories to everything we encounter in life: things within our control and things outside of our control. It's deceptively simple, yet profoundly powerful when applied to overcoming imposter syndrome. Let's start with what is in your control: your actions, your choices, your dedication to improvement. These are the things you have agency over, the aspects of your life where your effort makes all the difference. On the other hand, there are things outside your control, such as how others perceive you, the judgments they might form, or even whether they choose to acknowledge your contributions. Trying to control these external factors is like chasing the wind. It consumes energy but gets you nowhere. Imposter syndrome often thrives here, in the space where we tie our sense of worth to external validation, which is inherently unpredictable and fleeting. Epictetus reminds us, some things are in our control and others not. Our opinions, our pursuits, our desires are in our control. Our body, our property, our reputation, and our office are not. By recognizing this distinction, we can begin to shift our energy and focus. Instead of worrying about whether others think you're good enough, you can channel that energy into mastering your craft, showing up fully, and acting with integrity. When you focus on what is yours to control, the noise of external judgment starts to fade into the background. Let's put this into perspective with a practical example. Suppose you're giving a presentation at work. The moment you begin, that familiar fear creeps in. What if I mess up? What if they think I don't know what I'm talking about? These thoughts can spiral, leaving you feeling paralyzed. But here's where the dichotomy of control offers clarity. You cannot control whether your audience is impressed, whether they agree with you, or whether they even pay attention. Those factors are outside of your sphere of influence. What you can control is how thoroughly you've prepared, how clearly you present your ideas, and how calm you remain in the moment. If you've done your best on what is within your power, then why allow the uncontrollable to burden you? By embracing this Stoic principle, you reframe the narrative of imposter syndrome. Instead of measuring your worth through someone else's lens, you root it in your own effort and values. Ask yourself, did I prepare to the best of my ability? Did I act with honesty and intention? These are the measures of success that Stoicism invites you to adopt because they are firmly within your control. It's not about ignoring feedback or pretending external opinions don't matter. Instead, it's about recognizing that your peace of mind doesn't have to depend on them. When you let go of the need to control how others view you, you'll find a deeper, steadier confidence in the way you show up for yourself. After all, isn't it more empowering to trust in your own actions than to chase the unpredictable approval of others? This is the foundation for overcoming imposter syndrome, not silencing every doubt, but understanding that your true power lies in what you can control. Here's something to think about. What if the very thing you're afraid of, your flaws, your mistakes, your imperfections, wasn't something to hide, but something to embrace? The Stoics believed that striving for perfection wasn't just unnecessary, it was impossible. Seneca, one of the great Roman Stoics, famously said, "What progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." This reveals something profound. Even a philosopher as revered as Seneca acknowledged his own imperfections. He didn't claim to be flawless or beyond human error. Instead, he accepted his flaws as part of the human experience and focused on continuous improvement rather than unattainable perfection. This belief is a powerful antidote to imposter syndrome because at its core, imposter syndrome thrives on unrealistic standards. When you feel like a fraud, it's often because you're measuring yourself against an idealized version of perfection, an image of what you think you should be. But here's the truth: no one is perfect, and no one needs to be perfect to be worthy, successful, or valuable. The Stoics remind us that imperfection isn't a weakness, it's simply a reality. By learning to accept this, you can release yourself from the overwhelming pressure to always get it right. Think about it this way. Imagine you're starting a new job and you make a mistake on your first big project. Immediately, that voice in your head kicks in. They're going to see right through me. How could I mess this up? I'm not cut out for this. But what if instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you paused and reframed the situation? The Stoics would challenge you to see that mistake not as evidence of your inadequacy, but as an inevitable and valuable step toward growth. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, what stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the obstacle, your mistake, isn't something to run from. It's an opportunity to learn, adapt, and ultimately improve. Let's take this idea further with something practical. When you catch yourself aiming for perfection, ask yourself, is this standard realistic, or am I setting myself up for disappointment? Try viewing mistakes as data rather than failure. For example, if you receive critical feedback on that project, dissect it to uncover what you can adjust next time, instead of allowing it to define your worth. This shift in mindset, from fear of imperfection to appreciation for the learning process, allows you to move forward more resiliently and with greater self-compassion. Even in creative pursuits, the pressure to be perfect can feel paralyzing. Picture a writer agonizing over every sentence, afraid their draft won't measure up to the classics they admire. But what separates the greats from those who never publish isn't perfection. It's persistence and the willingness to iterate. The first draft doesn't have to be flawless, it simply needs to be written. Similarly, your first attempts in any area of life are just that, beginnings, not endings. When you accept imperfection, you give yourself permission to grow. You stop expecting yourself to know everything right away and start valuing the journey of figuring things out. Ask yourself this: instead of striving for an unattainable ideal, how can I show up as the most authentic version of myself today? How can I focus on progress, not perfection? These questions don't just silence the inner critic, they help you build a healthier, more realistic relationship with yourself. The beauty of Stoicism is that it doesn't ask you to overcome imposter syndrome by becoming perfect. It asks you to embrace your humanity, to understand that imperfection isn't a flaw, but a feature of life. This shift in perspective is liberating because it reminds you that your worth isn't tied to being flawless. Instead, it's found in your willingness to do your best, to learn from your mistakes, and to accept yourself fully, imperfections and all. Imagine this: you've just failed at something important to you. Maybe it's a project at work, a personal goal, or even a conversation where you wanted to make a good impression, but it didn't go as planned. That sinking feeling starts to rise, the sense that you're not good enough, that you don't belong, or that others will finally find you out. In moments like these, imposter syndrome feels most powerful, feeding off our resistance to what has happened. We wish we could undo the mistake, rewind time, change the outcome. But the Stoics offer a radically different approach to moments like these. They ask us not just to accept, but to embrace what has happened, failures and all. This is the practice of Amor Fati, loving one's fate. At its core, Amor Fati invites us to welcome every experience, good or bad, as a necessary and meaningful part of our unique journey. Marcus Aurelius captures this beautifully when he writes, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." In other words, every challenge, every failure, every perceived shortcoming is fuel for your growth, not evidence of your inadequacy. Rather than resisting what life hands you, Amor Fati asks you to see it as an opportunity, to trust that, even in moments of discomfort or doubt, the universe has a plan, and each experience is shaping you into the person you're meant to become. Let's go back to that hypothetical failure. From a Stoic perspective, the issue isn't the failure itself, it's the way we respond to it. Imposter syndrome thrives because it hinges on resistance, resisting our mistakes, resisting our imperfections, resisting the idea that where we are right now might actually be exactly where we're supposed to be. Amor Fati flips that script. Instead of wishing for a different past or fearing what others might think, it encourages us to embrace the reality of what is. The failed project, it taught you something about preparation or communication. The misstep in a conversation, it revealed a way to connect more authentically next time. When you stop fighting against your circumstances and start seeing them as part of your growth, imposter syndrome loses its grip. This mindset shift isn't about passive acceptance or pretending everything is perfect. It's about reframing challenges as essential stepping stones. Imagine an artist creating a masterpiece. Each brushstroke might not appear perfect in isolation, but together they contribute to the larger picture. Your journey works the same way. Every stumble, every doubt, every moment of uncertainty is a brushstroke in the masterpiece of your life. Amor Fati teaches you to see beauty and purpose in the process, even when the individual moments feel messy or incomplete. Of course, this isn't always easy. In situations where imposter syndrome hits hardest, we naturally want to push back or fixate on what went wrong. But the Stoics remind us that true power lies in how we respond. Instead of wishing for easier circumstances, we can learn to trust the lessons that come from tough ones. Marcus Aurelius also wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the essence of Amor Fati, not just tolerating life's obstacles, but embracing them as essential elements of your personal evolution. So how do you start practicing Amor Fati? When you face a setback or when those imposter syndrome doubts creep in, pause. Ask yourself, what can this teach me? How can this moment, no matter how uncomfortable it feels, make me stronger or wiser? Over time, this practice of reframing challenges through the lens of growth becomes second nature. You'll begin to see setbacks not as signs of failure, but as invitations to trust in the journey that's uniquely yours. By loving your fate, you let go of the need to prove yourself according to someone else's standards. You learn to trust that every experience, even the ones that feel like missteps, serves a purpose. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to realize that you are not an imposter. You are simply a person navigating your own path, as imperfect and extraordinary as anyone else's. Your worth isn't measured by outcomes, but by your actions. Let that sink in for a moment. In a world where we're so often judged by results, by promotions, accolades, or recognition, It's easy to internalize the idea that our value is tied to success in external terms. But the Stoics saw things differently. They believed that what truly matters is the effort you put in, the integrity of your actions, and your commitment to doing what's right, not the unpredictable, often uncontrollable outcomes of those actions. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which arm you against the present. This perspective frees us from the weight of external expectations and reminds us that our worth lies in the here and now, in the choices we make moment by moment. Now think about how imposter syndrome feeds on a fixation with results. It's the fear of not being good enough unless you achieve a flawless outcome. You might find yourself thinking, if I don't succeed at this, it'll prove I don't belong. Or, if this project doesn't win praise, everyone will see I'm not as competent as I seem. But here's the Stoic reframe. Success isn't defined by whether you reach a specific outcome. It's defined by the effort, the care, and the honesty you bring to the process. If you've done your best, acted with sincerity, and approached the task with purpose, then you've already succeeded, regardless of what happens next. Let's look at this through a practical lens. Imagine a musician performing on stage. They've rehearsed tirelessly, poured their heart into their craft, and given everything they have in that moment. But let's say, despite their best efforts, something goes wrong, a string breaks, or the audience doesn't respond as warmly as expected. Does that mean their performance was a failure? The Stoics would argue otherwise. The musician's accomplishment isn't diminished by the outcome. It's found in their dedication, their courage to step on stage, and their commitment to giving it their all. This idea can radically shift how you approach challenges in your own life. Instead of being trapped by the fear of not being good enough, you can focus on what you can control, your actions. Did you prepare thoroughly? Did you act with integrity? Did you give your full attention to the task at hand? These are the only questions that matter because they are within your power to answer. The rest, the applause, the recognition, the external measures of success is beyond your control and ultimately irrelevant to your true worth. By valuing actions over outcomes, you also free yourself from the constant comparison trap. So often, imposter syndrome is fueled by looking at others and thinking, they've achieved so much more than I have. But the Stoics remind us that everyone's journey is different, and comparison only distracts you from your own path. When you measure yourself by your actions, you stop holding yourself to someone else's external standards and start creating your own, rooted in effort and intention. Here's a question to reflect on. What would it feel like to focus entirely on your actions without worrying about the final result? Imagine submitting that work project simply knowing you did your best, or having that difficult conversation because it was the honest thing to do, regardless of the outcome. Marcus Aurelius urged us to rise above the noise of external validation, writing, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." In other words, your power lies in who you are and how you act, not in the results of those actions. So, the next time you catch yourself doubting your place, ask yourself, am I acting with integrity? Am I doing my best with what's within my control? If the answer is yes, then you have nothing to prove. Your worth isn't in the outcome, it's in the courage, effort, and honesty you brought to the table. And that, according to the Stoics, is the ultimate measure of success. Let's face it, how often do you replay a single comment in your mind, dissecting it from every angle? Perhaps it was a passing remark from a coworker or a bit of feedback from your manager. One critical word, and suddenly you're questioning everything, your abilities, your work, your place in the room. Or maybe it's the opposite, a compliment that sends you soaring, only for the high to fade as you wonder if you'll ever live up to those expectations again. Either way, relying on others' opinions, whether positive or negative, can feel like being on a roller coaster you can't control. But what if you could step off that ride entirely? This is where the Stoic practice of detachment from praise or criticism can transform the way you experience life. Seneca, one of the foundational Stoics, wisely said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." While this often applies to material things, it can also describe our hunger for external validation. Craving constant praise or fearing criticism leaves us dependent on something outside ourselves, something unpredictable and fleeting. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom comes from neutrality, learning to neither chase applause nor shrink from critique. Think about it. If you base your self-worth on external praise, you're always at the mercy of other people's opinions. What happens when the praise stops or when criticism takes its place? You spiral. This doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to feedback. It can be valuable for growth, but the key is learning to filter what truly matters. Neutrality doesn't mean indifference. It means recognizing that someone else's opinion is just that, their opinion, not an absolute truth about who you are. Let's take this a step further with a relatable scenario. Imagine presenting a project at work after weeks of effort. One person praises your creativity, while another points out several flaws in your approach. Where does your mind go? For most of us, it latches onto the criticism, replaying it over and over, convincing ourselves it's evidence that we've failed. But here's the Stoic perspective. Both the compliment and the critique are reflections of those individuals, shaped by their own biases, expectations, and moods. They don't define the objective value of your work or, more importantly, your worth as a person. By detaching from these judgments, you reclaim your peace of mind. You're no longer riding the emotional highs of approval or the lows of disapproval. You're grounded in your own sense of purpose and effort. Here's a practical way to start practicing this detachment. The next time you receive praise or criticism, take a deep breath and ask yourself, whose opinion am I giving power to? Does this person truly understand my journey or my intentions? Is their feedback rooted in truth, or is it simply a reflection of their perspective? You might realize that the opinions you've been internalizing don't hold as much weight as you thought. Moreover, ask yourself, do I believe in the effort and values I've brought to this situation? If you can answer that honestly, you'll find that others' judgments, whether they're claps or critiques, suddenly feel less heavy. By embracing this detachment, you gain freedom. The freedom to act authentically without being paralyzed by the fear of judgment or intoxicated by the need for applause. You free yourself from constantly seeking external validation, and instead you anchor yourself in your own values, intentions, and effort. Seneca reminds us, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. And part of that learning is realizing that the only opinion that truly matters is how you measure up to the standards you set for yourself. So ask yourself, whose opinions have I been giving too much power to? And how would my life change if I stopped craving their approval or fearing their criticism? When you let go of the need to control how others see you, you step into a state of inner peace that no external judgment can take away. What does it mean to live with integrity? Think about that for a moment. Integrity isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about staying true to your core values, even when the noise of the world tries to pull you in different directions. For the Stoics, living with integrity was at the heart of everything. They believed that a meaningful and fulfilling life comes not from chasing success, wealth, or external approval, but from anchoring yourself in your own virtues, your honesty, courage, kindness, self-discipline, and sense of justice. And when it comes to imposter syndrome, this principle can be a game changer. Here's why. Imposter syndrome thrives on the fear of being found out, the fear that you're not as capable or qualified as you appear to others. It fuels an endless cycle of proving yourself to the outside world, seeking validation, and measuring your worth by external markers like promotions, awards, or how others perceive you. But the Stoics teach us that none of those things, good or bad, define who you truly are. Instead, your worth lies in your character, in your commitment to living in alignment with your personal virtues. When you shift your focus from impressing others to living with integrity, imposter syndrome loses its grip. It no longer matters whether others see you as successful because your success comes from staying true to yourself. Take Marcus Aurelius, for example. Despite being one of the most powerful men in history, he constantly reminded himself to live simply, with humility, and to act in accordance with his values rather than being swayed by the opinions of others. In his Meditations he wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This idea can be applied directly to the fight against imposter syndrome. When you base your decisions and actions on what aligns with your values, your sense of worth becomes unshakable. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone because you know, deep down, that you're acting with integrity. So, how do you begin anchoring yourself in virtue? The key is to define what those virtues are for you. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? What values do I hold most dear? Maybe it's honesty, kindness, and perseverance, or perhaps it's creativity, humility, and fairness. Whatever they are for you, write them down. Make them a touchstone for your actions and decisions. When faced with self-doubt, return to these virtues and let them guide you. They'll provide a sense of clarity and purpose, reminding you that you don't need external validation. You only need to stay true to the person you aim to be. The Stoics also practiced a powerful exercise to stay grounded in their virtues: daily reflection. At the end of each day, they would take a moment to review their actions and ask themselves, did I live in alignment with my values today? Where did I succeed? Where can I improve? This exercise is incredibly grounding, especially when imposter syndrome strikes. For example, if you had a moment of self-doubt after a challenging day at work, you can reflect on whether you acted with integrity. Did you tackle the task with perseverance, even if the results weren't perfect? Did you treat others with fairness and respect? If the answer is yes, then that's what matters. You've already succeeded by living according to your virtues. Let's say you're feeling like an imposter because you didn't have all the answers in a team meeting. Reflection helps you shift the narrative. Instead of fixating on what you didn't know, you might realize that you demonstrated humility by being open to learning, or courage by sharing your ideas despite feeling uncertain. These are virtuous actions, and they're far more important indicators of your worth than knowing every detail. By anchoring yourself in your virtues, you create a solid foundation that no external judgment or fleeting success can shake. You no longer feel the need to wear a mask or live up to unrealistic expectations because you're living authentically, guided by what truly matters. So here's a question for you. What are your virtues and how can you let them guide your life? When you anchor yourself in these principles, you'll find that imposter syndrome begins to lose its hold. Instead of trying to prove yourself to others, you'll be focused on becoming the best version of yourself, and that's a standard worth striving for. What's the worst that could happen? It's a question we often avoid because, let's face it, imagining failure or adversity can feel overwhelming. But what if leaning into those fears, actually visualizing the worst-case scenarios, could help you face them with more courage and calm? The Stoics believed this practice, known as negative visualization, was one of the most powerful tools for building resilience and reducing the grip of fear and anxiety. It's counterintuitive at first. Why would you want to dwell on worst-case outcomes? But this technique isn't about pessimism. It's about preparation. Seneca, a master of this practice, advised that we should not only imagine adversity but rehearse it mentally. He famously wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." In other words, when you allow yourself to consider and even accept the possibility of setbacks, you strip them of their ability to paralyze you. Why? Because fear thrives on uncertainty, on the unknown. But when you look that fear in the eye and imagine what the worst truly looks like, two things happen. First, you often realize that the outcome isn't as catastrophic as it feels in your mind. Second, even if the worst does happen, you've already begun preparing yourself emotionally and mentally, making you more capable of handling it. Let's take a professional setback as an example. Imagine you're preparing for an important presentation at work. You're stressed, doubting yourself, and afraid of failure. What's the worst that could happen? Let's say you imagine stumbling over your words, forgetting key points, or seeing blank or unimpressed faces in the audience. Initially, this thought might trigger even more anxiety. But sit with it for a moment. How bad is that, really? Would it ruin your career? Probably not. Would it be uncomfortable and humbling? Sure. But the worst-case scenario might simply mean you learn from the experience, improve your delivery next time, and move on. Once you confront the possibility of failure head-on, you disarm it. It becomes less of a looming, undefined fear and more of a challenge you know you can recover from. Seneca took this practice a step further by rehearsing adversity in physical ways too. He suggested periodically living as though you had lost the comforts you take for granted, eating simple foods, wearing basic clothing, and imagining life without the luxuries you enjoy. He didn't recommend this to make life dreary or miserable, but to remind himself that even if he lost everything, life would still go on. This rehearsal of simplicity makes setbacks feel less intimidating. What if you tried a mental version of this? Picture a scenario where your project is rejected or your idea isn't well received. What would you do then? You'd adapt, rework your approach, and try again. Understanding that you could handle it should it happen makes the prospect far less frightening. There's also a hidden benefit to negative visualization. It helps you appreciate what you have right now. When you imagine losing something, whether it's your job, a relationship, or even your health, you begin to see those things in a new light. Instead of taking them for granted, you value them more deeply because you understand their impermanence. This dual effect, reducing fear of loss while increasing gratitude for the present, makes negative visualization a uniquely powerful practice for overcoming imposter syndrome. The next time you feel the weight of self-doubt or anxiety, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Then take it a step further. Imagine living through that scenario. Could you handle it? Would it really break you? Most of the time, you'll find that the answer is no, and with that realization comes a profound sense of freedom. When you're no longer ruled by a fear of hypothetical failure, you can approach challenges with greater confidence and clarity. So, how can you start using negative visualization in your everyday life? Take a moment at the beginning of your day or before a big event to mentally rehearse the worst-case scenario. Break it down step by step. What would happen? How might you respond? How could you move forward? By normalizing these thoughts, you not only build resilience but also diminish the power these fears hold over you. As Seneca reminds us, a man who has been expecting his misfortunes does not lament them. In other words, the more prepared you are for life's uncertainties, the less overwhelming they become. And with that, you'll find yourself standing taller, more grounded, and ready to face whatever comes your way. Have you ever found yourself stuck in a loop, replaying a past mistake or agonizing over how something might go wrong in the future? Maybe you fumbled an answer during a meeting last week, and even now it's all you can think about. Or maybe you're paralyzed by thoughts of an upcoming project, imagining every possible way it might fail before you've even started. These mental spirals can feel endless, and they feed directly into imposter syndrome, keeping you trapped in a cycle of self-doubt. But here's the thing, all that overthinking does nothing to change the past or control the future. It only pulls you further away from the one place where you actually have power, the present moment. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, in his timeless Meditations wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." It's a simple yet profound reminder that the only moment we truly possess is right now. When we dwell on the past, we're stuck in regrets over things we can't change. When we obsess over the future, we're borrowing worry from something that hasn't even happened yet. Both of these habits rob us of the energy and focus we need to handle the present moment, the only moment where we can take action, learn, and grow. Let's break it down with an example. Imagine you're preparing for a big presentation, but instead of focusing on the content or practicing your delivery, you find yourself lost in two competing mental narratives. On one side, your mind replays every tiny mistake from previous presentations, convincing you that you're not good enough. On the other, it's jumping ahead to the future, visualizing every possible way this presentation could go wrong. By the time you're done overanalyzing, you've wasted hours and only feel more anxious. But if you pulled yourself back to the present moment, you'd realize that the past is done, the future hasn't happened yet, and what matters most is what you choose to do right now. Maybe that's finalizing your slides, practicing your opening lines, or even just breathing to steady your nerves. Whatever it is, focusing on the present gives you clarity, and with clarity comes confidence. So how can we practice grounding ourselves in the present moment when overthinking threatens to take over? One of the most powerful tools is mindfulness. This doesn't mean you have to meditate for hours every day. It can be as simple as checking in with your breath when you notice your thoughts spiraling. For example, take a minute to inhale deeply, counting to 4, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then exhale slowly for a count of 6. This kind of intentional breathing anchors you in the now, calming your mind and body so you can refocus. Another practical tip is to break tasks into small, manageable steps. When the big picture feels overwhelming, zoom in on what you can do in the next 5 or 10 minutes. If you're preparing for a meeting and self-doubt creeps in, remind yourself that you don't have to tackle everything all at once. Maybe your immediate task is simply drafting an agenda or jotting down a few key points. By focusing on what's directly in front of you, you strip away the unnecessary layers of fear about the future. Lastly, remember to challenge your inner dialogue. Ask yourself, are these fears or regrets helping me right now, or are they just distractions? Marcus Aurelius offers a helpful guide when he writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This is a reminder that we can't control whether others will like our work or whether past mistakes will matter to them. What we can control, however, is how we approach the present moment, how we show up, and how we respond. By rooting yourself in the present, you reclaim your power from the endless what-ifs of the future and the should-haves of the past. And with time, this practice doesn't just quiet imposter syndrome. It teaches you to trust yourself moment by moment to handle whatever life puts in your path. So ask yourself right now, what is one small step you can take in this moment to move forward? The answer might seem simple, but in the present, simplicity is strength. How small are your worries in the grand scheme of things? It's a humbling question, isn't it? When we're caught in the grip of imposter syndrome, our doubts and insecurities can feel enormous, like a towering wave about to crash down on us. But the Stoics had a way of putting life's challenges into perspective, a method known as the view from above. This visualization technique encourages us to step back, rise above our immediate concerns, and see our situation from a much broader vantage point. And in doing so, it reminds us just how small and fleeting our worries are in the grander context of life. Imagine for a moment that you're floating high above the earth, looking down at everything far below. You see your city, the streets you walk every day, the buildings you frequent, and there you are, a single person amidst it all, carrying your worries and fears. Now lift yourself even higher. The city fades into the backdrop of your country. Then the entire planet comes into view, a small blue sphere spinning in the vast expanse of space. Can you see how, from this perspective, the things that feel so overwhelming in the moment, the missed deadline, the criticism, the fear of not measuring up, become much less significant? Not because they don't matter, but because they're just one small piece of a much larger picture. Marcus Aurelius often practiced this visualization as a way to gain clarity and reduce self-centered thoughts. In his Meditations he wrote, "Look down as if from a height on the countless gatherings and countless ceremonies, and every sort of voyage in storm and calm, and the disputes with and the agreements with one another. The long momentary clamor of it all, and then look beyond at the endless time to come." What Marcus understood was that by zooming out, by looking at life from a universal perspective, we realize how interconnected and transient everything is. The things we stress about, the judgments we fear, and the doubts that haunt us all fade in significance when viewed against the backdrop of time and space. When it comes to imposter syndrome, this technique can be incredibly liberating. Often, the feelings of inadequacy stem from an overly narrow focus on ourselves, our flaws, our mistakes, our perceived shortcomings. But the view from above reminds us that we're not the center of the universe. We're part of a much larger ecosystem of people, relationships, and experiences. While your self-doubt may feel all-consuming to you, the reality is that others aren't scrutinizing you as closely as you imagine. Like you, they're likely absorbed in their own concerns, their own lives. This perspective doesn't invalidate your feelings, it simply helps you take a step back and see them for what they are, temporary and manageable. It's a practice of putting your challenges into context. For example, let's say you're worried about a mistake at work, convinced it's irreparable and that everyone will judge you harshly. The view from above reminds you that life goes on. A month from now, a year from now, will anyone even remember this misstep? How does it fit into the larger story of your life, your growth, and the contributions you're working toward? When you rise above the immediacy of the moment, you often realize that your fears carry less weight than they seem to when you're stuck in the middle of them. To practice the view from above, take a moment to close your eyes and picture yourself from a higher vantage point. Start with your room, then your city, then the world. Consider not just your worries, but also the people, events, and connections around you. How are you contributing to something bigger? How do your actions, no matter how imperfect, play a role in the greater whole? This is the beauty of Stoicism. It teaches us that while our individual lives are small in the cosmic sense, they are also interconnected and meaningful. Your contributions, no matter how small they may feel to you, ripple outward in ways you might not even realize. The view from above shifts your mindset. Instead of being consumed by self-doubt, you see yourself as part of a larger system, a web of relationships and actions that extends far beyond any single moment of fear or failure. And with that realization, imposter syndrome begins to lose its power. When you see the bigger picture, you remember that life is vast and your worth is not defined by the fleeting worries of the day. Instead, it's found in the way you show up, connect, and contribute to the world around you. Adversity is your greatest teacher. It's easy to forget this when life throws challenges your way, when you stumble, face setbacks, or feel like you're in over your head. But the Stoics saw these moments not as reasons to despair, but as opportunities, as gifts in disguise that shape us into stronger, wiser, more capable individuals. For those struggling with imposter syndrome, embracing this mindset can be transformational. What if instead of fearing failure, you saw it as the very thing you need to grow? What if every doubt, every struggle, and every challenge became a step forward rather than a setback? Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who began his life as a slave and endured unimaginable hardships, is one of the strongest voices on this subject. Despite his circumstances, he taught that it is not external events that harm us, but our interpretation of them. One of his most powerful lessons was this: difficulties are things that show a person what they are. In other words, adversity reveals your inner strength, your character, your resilience. It's not the absence of struggle that defines you, it's how you respond to it. For Epictetus, every challenge was an invitation to grow stronger, to refine the will, and to develop wisdom. Think about the last time you faced a difficult situation. Maybe it was a project where you felt completely out of your depth, or a time when you received criticism that shook your self-confidence. In those moments, it's tempting to give in to feelings of inadequacy or to shrink back, convinced that you're not capable. But here's where the Stoic mindset offers a pivotal shift. Those moments, as uncomfortable as they might feel, are not evidence of your failure, they're your opportunity to rise. The very fact that you're struggling means you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and that's where real growth happens. Let's break this down with an example. Imagine you're learning a new skill, something completely unfamiliar, like coding or public speaking. At first, it feels nearly impossible. Mistakes pile up, self-doubt creeps in. Your inner voice might even tell you, "See, you're not cut out for this." But what if you reframed those mistakes as essential steps in the learning process? Each misstep teaches you something new, strengthens your ability to problem solve, and builds your resilience. Without those challenges, you'd never improve. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes second nature, not because you avoided hardship, but because you embraced it. Now, apply this to imposter syndrome. When you feel like you're falling short or that you don't belong, remember Epictetus' words: difficulties show you what you are. These moments of doubt and discomfort are opportunities to show yourself who you truly are, to prove that you have the courage to persevere, the humility to learn, and the strength to keep showing up even when it's hard. Adversity becomes less about proving your worth to others and more about building your character and resilience. Here's a practical way to start embracing adversity as growth. The next time you face a challenge, pause and ask yourself, what is this teaching me? How can this experience make me stronger? Shifting your mindset in this way doesn't remove hardship, but it changes your relationship to it. Instead of fearing failure, you begin to welcome the lessons it brings. Over time, this perspective weakens the hold of imposter syndrome, because you're no longer defining yourself by whether you succeed or fail in the eyes of others. Instead, you're focused on how each challenge helps you grow into the person you're meant to become. The Stoics didn't pretend that adversity was easy. They didn't claim it was something to seek out or celebrate in the moment, but they did understand that life's difficulties are inevitable and that within each one lies the potential for growth. When you embrace this truth, you stop seeing challenges as threats to your self-worth and start viewing them as opportunities to build your resilience, refine your skills, and most importantly, trust in your ability to endure and thrive. Remember, the rockiest roads often lead to the most beautiful destinations. Every struggle you face becomes part of your story, shaping a stronger, more capable version of you. So when adversity comes knocking, meet it with the strength of will that Epictetus so often spoke of and see it for what it truly is, your greatest teacher. Imposter syndrome can feel like a heavy burden, a shadow that follows you no matter how much you achieve. But here's the truth, it's not a weight that you're destined to carry forever. By embracing the wisdom of the Stoics, you can begin to see imposter syndrome for what it is: not a reflection of your abilities, but a challenge that calls for a shift in perspective. The Stoics teach us that the key to overcoming feelings of inadequacy lies not in proving ourselves to others, but in finding strength within. Through principles like detachment from external validation, anchoring yourself in the present, and building resilience through adversity, you can move beyond those self-imposed limits and step into a life of confidence and authenticity. When you let go of the need to control how others perceive you, you reclaim a sense of peace. When you focus on the present moment, you free yourself from the endless loop of regret and worry. And when you embrace challenges as opportunities to grow, you transform even the toughest moments into stepping stones on your path to becoming stronger and wiser. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practices that you can start applying today. They're tools to help you rewrite those inner narratives that tell you you're not enough. Each time you choose to act with courage, live by your values, and face your fears head-on, you take a step away from doubt and closer to your true self. Marcus Aurelius, whose words have guided so much of this journey, offers a powerful reminder of the strength that's already within you. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This is the essence of Stoicism. The power to let go of self-doubt, to move beyond imposter syndrome, has been inside you all along. It's not about changing the world around you to feel worthy. It's about changing the way you see yourself. So, what's your next step? How can you start putting these Stoic principles into action in your own life? Maybe it's practicing detachment by reminding yourself that others' opinions don't define your worth. Maybe it's grounding yourself in the present when worries about the future start to take over. Or maybe it's reframing a recent setback as a lesson rather than a failure. Whatever it is, start small. Pick one principle, one idea that resonates with you, and commit to living it out today. And you don't have to do it alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part of today's insight spoke to you most? How have you dealt with imposter syndrome in your own life, or how do you plan to moving forward? Let's learn from each other, build a supportive community, and continue growing together. If this exploration of Stoic wisdom has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more insights into living a life of purpose, resilience, and inner peace. Remember, overcoming imposter syndrome isn't about erasing every doubt. It's about showing up for yourself time and time again with the courage to be imperfect, the wisdom to learn from challenges, and the strength to trust in your own journey. The path forward may not always be easy, but with the timeless guidance of the Stoics, you'll walk it with greater clarity, confidence, and peace.